Hey there, how there, ho there, it's Jeff Cutter Diamond. Welcome you to yet another Cutter Top 10 sports video. Of course, as I'm rocking the Raptors Chevron jersey, not jersey, jersey. A t-shirt that looks like a jersey, and of course, Kyle Lowry's number 7, because lucky number 7. We are going through another NBA Top 10, and today we're going to look at the top 10 NBA busts of all time. A lot of people will be thinking, well, are there any busts to do with the Toronto Raptors? In essence, no. But like the top 10 does not have any former Toronto Raptor. Well, one who actually picked up with the Raptors, but he didn't really play much. But yeah, there is an honorable mention with the Raptors draft pick, and that's Andrea Bargnani, the first number one overall pick to be the first number one and the only number one draft pick of the Raptors in 2006. Borgnani was drafted first overall, where there were plenty of other good athletes like who's that guy? Who was that guy from San Antonio? LaMarcus Aldridge, for example. But yeah, that's big. But Borgnani, well, the Raptors got rid of him to the Knicks, which actually worked out. But nevertheless, we are going to go with these top 10 draft busts. Number 10 is Jay Williams, second overall from the University of Duke to the Chicago Bulls. Chicago was in rebuild mode. They had won 6 titles in 8 years in the 90s, and they were looking good. But MJ decided to retire. Scottie Pippen left for Houston. Or was it? Yeah, for 1 year for Houston. And then other players were left too. Some say Jerry Krause did not do well keeping the team together. I guess once Michael left, they didn't feel like staying in Chicago. Kukoc stayed in Chicago, didn't he? Steve Kerr? But anyway, yeah. So the Bulls were fighting it off. And then their second pick was Jay Williams of the Chicago Bulls. He had a motorcycle accident which hurt him. And I think that's the same guy who one time took some friends to medieval times or whatever, at some kind of meal. And then once he came back to his mansion, he was twirling his gun and then shot his limo driver dead. And, he was scared what would happen. But yeah, he was a bust and all that. The next Chicago number one draft pick would be good, Derrick Rose, but only when he's healthy. Number 9 is Johnny Flynn of the Minnesota Timberwolves, taken from the University of Syracuse, 6th overall in 2009. 2009 was a big moment. Minnesota had 2 key draft picks in the first 6 picks. Their first one, Ricky Rubio, actually worked out to be pretty good. He was a pretty good point guard, but for strange reasons, he faltered 5 years later. But yeah, Rubio was okay. But then the Timberwolves, with their second pick of the first 6, took Johnny Flynn, thinking that he'll be a good shooting guard, from the University of Syracuse. He looked pretty good. He didn't really work out, and worst of all was a couple of picks later who Minnesota didn't. It was what Minnesota didn't do. And they didn't draft some guy from Davidson who had a great career in the 2008 March Madness and made his stock rise. Name? Stephen freaking Curry. That's right. Minnesota had 2 chances to take Steph Curry, and they floundered. Number 8 is Michael Olowokandi, or Olowokandi, from the University of Pacific. First overall in 1998 by the LA Clippers. The LA Clippers were a terrible franchise. Sports Illustrated in 2001 named it the worst franchise ever. And of course, the Clippers weren't always in LA. They were starting up expansion franchise as the Buffalo Braves from 70 to 78, then moved to San Diego to become the San Diego Clippers. It made sense because of those ships. And then they transferred to LA thanks to Dallas Sterling in 1985 to try to compete with the Lakers for fans. But the Clippers were put into the LA Sports Arena, and the Lakers played in the Great Western Forum. They were always little brother and all that. The Clippers were terrible. They got the number 1 pick in 1998. Well, 10 years earlier, they did have the number 1 pick, and Danny Manning was great, but not for the Clippers. So anyway, Olowokandi was big. They wanted the center for the University of Pacific. I hate to say this, but how many good players come from the University of Pacific? Barely any. I mean, they had some good March Madness runs, but basically, what NBA legends come from the University of Pacific? Nobody. They used to have a football team for a few years in the NCAA. But regardless of that, Olowokandi was underwhelming to say the least. And the Clippers could have found better success with other players. Number 7 is Hashim Fabit, second overall from the University of Connecticut by the Memphis Grizzlies. I guess he was so good for the University of Connecticut, he had his number 34 retired by UConn. Well, he was a March Madness icon, but that doesn't sometimes translate to the pro game that well. The only reason why I know if the Beats number is retired by UConn was because a couple days earlier, they actually retired the number 11 of a player. I can't remember the player's name, but he's still there, UConn number 11 on senior night because he was kind of the winningest player in NCAA history. He spent all 4 years there. But anyway, yeah, the Beat couldn't do anything. Memphis wanted a good center, and his skill set didn't translate well to the pro game, so he was not reliable at all. Number 6, Adam Morrison, picked 3rd overall by the Charlotte Bobcats from University of Gonzaga. You know who Adam Morrison is. Well, before his NBA days. He was a great player for Gonzaga, all those players. Unfortunately, though, Adam Morrison would be known for one terrible moment in March Madness when Gonzaga was playing UCLA in the regional semifinals. Gonzaga had a massive lead. It looked like they were going to go to the Elite Eight, but then they lost it. LA chipped away the lead, and then basically they stole the ball. Farmer did and scored, and then Gonzaga couldn't score. And we saw the image of Adam Morrison sitting down at center court crying and all that. I mean, feel sympathy for the guy, but the guy freaking had the bushy hair and had a mustache and all that, like the goatee. It was like this guy looks like a 30-year-old, and he's supposed to be in college. He looks like Max from George Lopez, with that fluffy hair and where he, like his facial hair and all that, kind of awkward looking. But yeah, Adam Morrison was known as a crybaby, I guess. The Bobcats decided to give him a fresh start, 3rd overall 2006, which would be good for Charlotte. I mean, after all, he would be under MJ's tutelage as an owner. Unfortunately, he couldn't adapt to the NBA, and by 2009, he was out. Too bad. I mean, Adam Morrison could have been a great player. Number 5 is Sam Bowie from Portland, 1984, from the University of Kentucky. He should be very lucky he's not number 1 because there's been some terrible players ahead of him and all that. But anyway, yeah, the second oldest of the top 5 is 2001, if you must know. So yeah, Sam Bowie was a decent center for the University of Kentucky. When he was healthy, he was good, but he lost kind of the combination of 2 full seasons in Kentucky due to leg injuries. So bad that they were compared to the only people his injuries were compared to were male ballerinas. So anyhow, Sam Bowie, well, that should have been a red flag because of his legs and all that. However, Portland, after losing the coin flip to Houston, before 1985, the NBA had the number 1 pick settled by a coin flip. The worst team in the East and the worst team in the West would get it, and then one of them would call a coin in the air, and then that team would get the number 1 pick. You win the coin flip, you get the 1 pick. You lose the coin flip, you get number 2. No big deal. However, Portland only had the number 2 pick because they took it from Indiana in a 1981 trade, and the Pacers were the worst team in the East. Houston kind of tanked. They got what they wanted. They got Hakeem Olajuwon, University of Houston guy like Clyde Drexler. But Clyde Drexler was playing for Portland. Nevertheless, Portland decided to draft Sam Bowie. And worst of all, the next pick, number 3, would change the sports world forever. Chicago Bulls taking Michael Jordan and all that. I don't think Houston had really had room for MJ and all that. If you watch ESPN Classic, they do a top 5 reasons thing, and one of the things is top 5 reasons why Sam Bowie you can't blame Sam Bowie for being drafted by Portland. One of them was that MJ's stock volume actually was lowered because of him playing in the Dean Brown system that, there was set amount of numbers, a set amount of minutes you play and all that. You're not above the team. Also, that Portland really didn't need a guard because they did have Jim Paxson and Clyde Drexler there. Another reason was because of the whole thing that you need a center to be a good player. Because they said, 18 of the previous 21 champs before 1984, they had a dominant center and all that. That was the key. The center was the key piece, and Portland needed that. After all, Bill Walton was the key piece in 1977 before he fell into injuries, and they traded him to the Clips. But yes, injuries and inconsistency plagued his career. He did okay for the Nets later in his career, but yeah, Portland wishes they had MJ or something like that. Number 4 is Kwame Brown, drafted first overall 2001 out of high school by Washington. And yes, Michael Jordan was owner of that team. It's hard to pick a high schooler. Actually, after 2007, the rules were set that you must play one college season before you could be in the drafted. Or you could be drafted as a 19-year-old, like playing overseas and all that. We've seen people like from the G League do that. But nevertheless, Kwame Brown was just terrible and all that. And yes, high schoolers at number one were rare. I mean, well, LeBron will say no. But anyway, yeah, Kwame Brown was just terrible and all that. Michael Jordan had faith in him, which was weird. But Kwame Brown allegedly crossed MJ's path one too many times, and MJ kind of blackballed him. I don't know, or basically didn't like him around and all that. Yeah, MJ kind of had an ego problem. Nevertheless, Kwame Brown just didn't work out. He did play for the Lakers, and I do believe he won a title with the Lakers, didn't he? Anyway, number 3 is Anthony Bennett, first overall from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, from the Cleveland Cavaliers, 2013. Cleveland were in a rut and all that. Once LeBron left for Miami in that stupid decision thing that took an hour, which he could have just done it in 30 minutes, no big deal. Cleveland fans burned his stuff, and the team sucked terribly. They got Kyrie Irving first overall in 2012, which was pretty good. But then Cleveland somehow got the first overall pick in 2013, and they took it on Anthony Bennett. He was a decent player, the royalty. I mean, Larry Johnson and Stacey Augmon are UNLV, or Anderson Hunt. But the fact of the matter is that Anthony Bennett was just sucking. After school and all that, his fitness, his performance, he just couldn't get anything going and all that. So, yeah, Cleveland got a little antsy and all that. And worst of all, Anthony Bennett was Canadian too. He was the first Canadian to be picked first overall. And I guess that made people think Canadians shouldn't be first overall in basketball. In hockey, yes, but basketball, no. And kind of gave Canadians a problem. I mean, Cleveland did draft Andrew Wiggins first overall, but they traded him to Minnesota for Kevin Love. And it worked out for Minnesota. Wiggins was decent. But yeah, Anthony Bennett struggled. He did finish his career with the Raptors, but couldn't make it stick. Bad. Number 2 is Darko Milicic. You know you're bad when you are talked about in one of the greatest classes of basketball history, 2003. I put 96 over 2003 because look at the top 30 guys, and you have so many legends and all that. And yes, Kobe Bryant was part of that thing too. But yeah, Darko Milicic. When you have a draft that has Carmelo Anthony, Chris Bosh, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron James in your top 5, you fucked up. Like the problem was the impact was there. Everyone wanted an impact. Milicic coming from Serbia. LeBron went first over with Cleveland, then Detroit picked second and took Darko Milicic. They could have had Carmelo Anthony, who ended up being a Denver/New York icon from Syracuse, who in his freshman year led Syracuse to the national title. They could have had Chris Bosh, great power center from forward/center from Georgia Tech, who became a Raptor/Heat legend, or Dwayne Wade, who was a Heat legend. He came from the University of Marquette. But the fact of the matter is that the Pistons decided to go with a center, and it didn't work out. Milicic was a bust. Rasheed Wallace was a better player, and Ben Wallace came out of effing nowhere. He was undrafted from Virginia Union. Nobody thought he was going anywhere, and Ben Wallace shocked the world and just basically bit us in the butt, saying he was undrafted, but he pulled a rabbit out of that. The good news for Milicic is that he actually did win a ring with the 2004 Pistons, so he kind of got the last laugh on everyone. I mean, Melo never won a ring. Bosch won a couple with the Heat and alongside Dwayne Wade, and LeBron has won a few rings. So, thus, Milicic can brag over Anthony. I have a ring, you don't. Of course, he's in Serbia kickboxing and sucking. And number one is not completely by his own fault, but bad luck with injuries. It's Greg Oden, 2007, first overall from the Ohio State assholes. I mean the Buckeyes. 2007 Portland Trailblazers. Greg Oden was in the conversation to be the number one draft pick. He was coming out of Ohio State, which had John Havlicek. And who else was good from Ohio State? Well, Bobby Knight. He played for Ohio State. Didn't think you knew that. I know you don't know that, but it happened. Yeah, so Greg Oden was good and all that. He was on the cover of NCAA College Hoops 2K8 for the PS2. That's how I know him. Yeah, he's a great Ohio State player and all that, like Havlicek. But the fact of the matter is his career is screwed up. Persistent injuries, he couldn't do his potential, and he flopped heavily. Worst of all, the number 2 pick was Kevin Durant, and KD is still in the league to this day. And we're talking 2026, although he's played for several teams, including Oklahoma City and Golden State. But still, Greg Oden could have been much better if he wasn't injury prone. So that's something to think about. Really. Yes, really. So anyway, that's all I've got for the NBA Draft Plus. I'm Jeff Diamond. Adieu.